So I think that's a super fair question. And maybe I'll just go back for a second and just give you a little context about how we got here. When we were doing our token distribution event, it was a pretty new idea. Here's an established company, billion-dollar valuation, launching its own cryptocurrency. And I think we were the first VC-backed company to do that. Certainly the first unicorn company to do that. And because of that, there's a lot of lawyers and accountants and investors involved of, okay, what is this new thing? How are we going to make it work? And we wanted to do things in sort of as a regulatory compliant way as possible. And so at the time, on the other side, we also looked at all these exchanges, and they were at the time just picking up these tokens, these new tokens on their own. There's a new token distribution event, right away the token gets picked up on all these major exchanges. And so we sort of sat there and we said, okay, we're not quite sure what the rules are going to be going forward. And so we want to be as sort of regulatory safe as possible. And at the same time, these exchanges are just picking up the tokens on their own. Like, let's just let the exchanges pick up the token. That way we can be safe and the token gets out there, because we do need the tokens to be on the exchanges for this ecosystem to work. Developers and consumers and everybody who's going to be part of Kin is going to need that liquidity. And so we thought we were pretty, clever about this. But then the world changed right as we did our token distribution event. New guidance came out from the regulators, putting more pressure on the exchanges to do a lot more due diligence on which tokens they would pick up. And that, I think, caught everybody a little off guard. And so right away, we had to change our approach to how we would work with exchanges, but also the exchanges had to change their own approach, how they would vet new tokens and get them onto the exchanges. And so that took some time. The world changed, how tokens get onto the exchanges changed, and how we had to operate within that new world changed as well. And so I can't talk about this too much because it's a confidential process, is what people have asked for at this point. But I will say that we are fully aware that for this ecosystem to work, for Kin to work, there needs to be liquidity for these tokens on major exchanges. A big thing, we do this token distribution event back in September, and then we're ramping up. We're getting to the point where we're able to deliver this really clear roadmap to the community. And I think if I were sitting in the community, I would be like, what is taking so long? Like, just publish the roadmap. What is taking so long? And I think the thing that I underestimated, was just how long it would take to transition from a company that was trying to build one app, add advertising to it, and then scale that into an advertising business. That's what we were doing 3 months ago even. That was the game plan. We had 160 people trying to build a traditional company with a traditional revenue model in a traditional way. And then all of a sudden, here we were, we had this sort of what people called a crazy idea when we first started talking about this back in 2011, of building, instead of building a traditional company with a traditional model in a traditional way, we're building a new type of company and a new type of model in a totally new type of way. We're building a new economy around a new currency. And so I think, as we got through that token distribution event, as we sort of realized that, oh my gosh, the world is behind us, we're going to be able to execute on this dream that we've always had, we underestimated how long that transition would take. We had to go back to becoming a startup. This was, for 9 years, we had sort of optimized and learned how to build a mobile app and execute in the mobile space in this sort of industry dominated by giants. And here we were going back to the early days of an industry. Crypto today sort of reminds me of mobile back in 2009 when we first started Kik. And, so there's less data out there, there's less research, and you need to transition from, sort of very, cautiously, systematically, and back into, let's be scrappy, let's make bets, let's move quickly. And so that's the transition we've been making internally, the transition for how we operate, the transition for how we communicate, both internally but also externally, to default open. and that's taken time. But I now feel like we're coming out of that transition, and we're coming out of it with sort of a unique view into not just sort of the go-to-market and the strategy behind cryptocurrencies, but with also the brand and scale of an existing consumer app. And then also with sort of 9 years of very painful lessons learned. And so the next step on the roadmap is the number one priority for me right now is to get to a very simple drag and drop SDK. So that's the first thing. That's what we're working on now, is so that out of the box, any app out there, they could take this Kin SDK, drop it into their app, and within 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, they could boot up their app, and right away there's a balance for their users, there's ways to earn, and there's ways to spend. That's the number one thing we're working on right now. We hope to deliver that in Q1.